Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Pedig Beis, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Yud Tes. We left off on Daf Yud Tes Amid Aleph at the end of the third line from the top of the Amid, and we are going to continue to learn regarding other aspects connected to the conquest of Eretz Yisrael under the leadership of Yeshua. Now it's clear that David HaMelech, as we learned yesterday, conquered Syria, which is more or less where current Syria is, Aram Naharayim, Aram Tzoiva, before the entire Eretz Yisrael was conquered. The question is, was Eretz Yisrael, was the Shiva So'amim ever fully conquered? And we're going to have some very interesting historical discussion in the beginning of today's daf. Now, in the Mishnah, we were discussing the case where soil from Chutz La'aretz was put on a ship, and the ship entered the Eretz Yisrael's territorial waterway. We're going to today quote a Baraisa that's going to discuss soil michutz la'aretz into the Syria territorial waterway. Don't forget, Chavre, that Syria, because of it being coined as kibush yachid, for sure, it's not imbued with biblical kedushas Eretz Yisrael. The rule is that maisris and shvius have to be kept in Syria midrabanan. We're going to see why that's so important. So we're going to be discussing about soil on a ship in the territorial waters of Syria, and then from there it went into Eretz Yisrael, and we'll see how that is going to be very consequential. We're going to further elaborate Shitas, Rabbi Yehuda and the Mishnah, that the ship, and the Mishnah was when it came from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. That which grows in the soil in the ship is only subject to maisris and shvius when it's touching the ground. We're going to have a discussion today. What's behind Shitas Rabbi Yehuda? Option number one is, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is Shitas Rab Chagai, the water under the ship is as if it does not exist. Which means, listen to this logic, it creates a void. There is a void underneath the ship. The void prevents the soil of the ship, in the ship, to become bottle to the ground underneath it. The Gemara, I think Rabbi Yossi argues, and he says that L'shitas Rabbi Yehuda, it's not about bottle or not bottle, or whether there is a void that's disallowing bittul. No, it's about Yenika, which is what we are b'chlal familiar with. The whole topic of atzos nakov, of atzos she'ena nakov, as we'll elaborate when we will learn in the Gemara. And finally, we're going to move on to the next part in the Mishnah, where the Mishnah is discussing a dough that was needed b'mei peres. The Mishnah says chayiv b'chala, and we're going to connect it to a Mishnah in Tful Yom. Now, just to remember, guys, someone who went to the mikvah, but it's not yet head of shemesh, is no longer tamei on the level for them to be mitame meiser sheni, but they could be mitame truma. So the case in the Mishnah in Tful Yom will be when you have grain of truma that became muksher, became wet with one of the shivas, one of the seven liquids. Dried or not is irrelevant. It became muksher. It was kneaded into a dough b'mei peres. A Tful Yom touched it. So there was a machlokes tanoim, listen to this, that the Tful Yom was metame the area that he touched, of course, because truma becomes tummy from a Tful Yom before head of shemesh. Question is, if a Tful Yom or anyone who's tummy would have touched flour, does the whole bowl of flour become tummy? Absolutely not. What was touched, that which had contact with the Adam whose tummy becomes tummy, and we're going to call that shlishi, and then it can't even be metama further. Only when we view what's in the bowl as one unit do we say, he touched part of the unit, all of the unit becomes tummy. How are we to view a dough that was needed b'mei peres? Is it halachically one unit? All of it will become tummy, or is it halachically not one unit?
Are they not biting each other?
They're biting each other. They're kneaded together. Very good.
Right.
So the Gemara is going to make a correlation or challenge the correlation with our Mishnah, as we will see. That's the sikkum of today's daf. Daf Yud Tes Amud Aleph. The third line from the top of the Amid, at the end of the line, We want to know more about the conquest of Eretz Yisrael. Now, let me just give some people some history. And for many of us that unfortunately did not yet properly learn Nach, at least we'll get a little bit here from the Gemara. I know that many years ago here in Sola, Chabad Sola, we went through the whole Nach, and maybe it's high time to do that again. It was so amazing for me. In other words, I didn't learn it in yeshiva.
This time?
Maybe we'll do it on video. Okay, now, when people hear the word Yeravam, their brains goes to Yeravam ben Avat, right? We're not talking about Yeravam ben Avat. Chata v'hechti asarabim, the whole division of Eretz Yisrael into two kingdoms happened over there. We're talking about Yeravam ben Yoyash, who actually did something amazing. And let me just give you the history. Yeshua conquered, I already said yesterday, Yeshua did not conquer all of Eretz Yisrael, even though we attribute the conquest to him. But then there was a lot yet to be conquered. Prior to us conquering more, we actually, after the passing of Yeshua, other nations, whether it was the nation of Aram or others, they came into Eretz Yisrael, and they took away cities that was already under Kibush Yehudi. And Yeravam ben Yoyash, when he became king, he reconquered it. Question the Gemara will have is, did he only reconquer that which Yeshua already conquered, or did he actually conquer it all? And let's go read it inside. Ksiv, it says, and here we're quoting a pasuk from Malachim. For some reason, we go Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis. Stam lahoyd, Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis, Shoftim Aleph, Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Beis. You know who made that? Not Yidden. It's interesting that we follow that. But anyways, in Malachim Beis Yudalit, so this pasuk is speaking, who refers to Yeravam ben Yoyash. Heishiv es Gvul Yisrael, he restored the boundary of Eden. Now, when we're speaking about the biblical boundaries of it, it's so interesting. Chala daf yutes, Chala Yerushalmi daf yutes on the top. Milavoy Chamos. Now, Milavoy Chamos means from the approach of Chamos. I know that generally, first of all, don't confuse Hamas with a Samach, Chamos with a Sof. Very different. Look inside the Marafulda, 5 lines from the top, and he writes the Marafulda that Chamos hu b'mekzoya mizrachis tzfainis. It's on the northern, eastern border of Israel. Guys, what's northern, eastern now? Just to know, Syria. Okay? That's one end. In other words, the pasuk is saying that he restored the boundaries of Israel. Milavoi Chamos ad Yam ha'arava. Yam ha'arava refers to Yam HaMelech. Yam HaMelech is southwest. I know it's not the Mediterranean, not west, but it's a diagonal. It's very interesting, this pasuk. So again, we conquered. After the passing of Yeshua, there were wars the whole time. Melech Haram, what's recorded, took away from us certain cities, and this Yeravam, not Ben Avat, Yeravam ben Yoyash, he reconquered Israel. And the way we describe it, it almost sounds like the whole thing. Because when you give, listen, either you give four borders. 4 borders will be ideal. What do I mean by 4 borders? Give the northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. I know it's not a box, but at least you're giving comprehensive. If you want to be makatzer, one way of abbreviating is you give in this case, very good, I thank you for the map. You give the northeast and the southwest. That would be another way, perhaps, of suggesting that he reconquered it all. And that's a machlekes here in the Yerushalmi. Milavoy Chamos, from Chamos again is the northeast. Yam Ha'arava, the Marafulda understands that to be southwest. And Kidvar Hashem Elikei Yisrael, and he did it according to the word of Hashem. Where did he get this commandment to do it? And he was successful. Now we know more about the Yoina. Many people just know the story of Yoina from Yom Kippur. A lot more about the prophet Yoina. Asher diber beyad avdo Yoina ben Amitai Hanavi. And which Yoina ben Amitai? Asher migas hachefer. That's just where he was from. So when you have such a pasuk, says our Gemara, Rabbi Chananya v'Rabbana, just for the people that are new to Yerushalmi, there's so little agada that this is as good as it gets. Does it does. But it's interesting. And once Chadamar v'Chadamar, as a klal, this the Rebbe taught in Rashi, in Chumash Rashi, even though there's many exceptions. Chadamar v'Chadamar normally means that the first chad is Rab Chananya, and the second chad is the second, and that's taka the case over here. So Rab Chananya v'Rabbana, Chadamar, kol mashe kibesh Yeshua kibesh, that Yeravam reconquered whatever Yeshua conquered. Now that means it was limited, just for the record. Yeshua did not conquer it all. That was the whole issue. Like we said yesterday, that David HaMelech, who taka conquered Syria, why wasn't Syria imbued with Kedushas Eretz Yisrael? According to the opinions that hold that once we conquer all of Eretz Yisrael, if we further make the Israel greater, that becomes also holy. That's because David HaMelech did the conquest of Syria before, imagine David, before everything was conquered. So one opinion holds that this Yeravam only conquered that which Yeshua conquered. V'charna Amar in Yerushalmi, Acher, Ara Aleph. It's like V'acher Amar. But V'charna Amar, the other one says, Yoisar Mima Shekibesh Yeshua Kibesh, which would be Gavaldik. In other words, according to this version, when we finally conquered all Yeravam ben Yoyash. Melech Yisrael, because that's already after Yeravam ben Aved. There was already a division. He wasn't a real king, okay, but he was a great general. He was Matzliach. Now the Gemara says, look at the new words. I don't remember ever learning an Amoyder called Rebbe Siddur. Rebbe Siddur. Rebbe Siddur means that Rebbe Siddur, the Amoyder, he had a tradition of the following brisa. Brisas were all taught by heart. So Tani Rab Siddur, there is a brisa that was repeated by the Amoyra Rebbe Siddur, and that brisa is Messiah l'Rebbe Mana. L'Rebbe Mana is the V'charna Amar. Yoyser Mimashe Kibish. That what? That Yomim Kalam Asi Yisrael Ba'oisa Haaretz. That which Yeravam ben Yoyash reconquered was only settled for a very small amount of time. Now let me just say the following. After this is something that we are all familiar with, that Melech Ashur, Sancheiriv Melech Ashur, right? He was the one that exiled the 10 tribes, and that happened Yomim Kalim. Yomim Kalim doesn't have to mean days. And by the way, in the context of us being there for almost 860, 70 years in total, it can even mean 100 years relative. It would mean Yomim Kalim, but for a very short amount of time were we there, because afterwards, Melech Ashur exiled. First, he exiled the tribes that were Me'ever LaYarden, as we know, but ultimately he exiled the 10 tribes. And just speaking about that, just for the record, the Gemara says, right, that Yoshiyo HaMelech, 35 years before the Churban, was successful in bringing, you can say, most of them back. In other words, when people say they lost 10 tribes, okay, some of them are taka lost, and a Hanami, but it's not the way people think, to the point that Yovel returned, the Gemara says, because we had the roiv of every shevet back. Now, what's the proof? If Yeravam ben Yoyash would have reconquered that which Yehoshua already conquered, then it doesn't make sense, argues the Gemara, for the Braisa to say, Yomim Kalim, we were only there for a short amount of time. Could be we only returned for a short amount of time, but we were there from the beginning. This Yomim Kalim is mashma, not only future, that from when he conquered ahead, shortly afterwards, whatever that means, Melech Ashur took us out. It also means that we were never there before. In other words, he conquered more territory. That more territory was something that was under Jewish possession for very Yomim Kalim-like days. Not there was a past and there was barely a future. It fits more with the Shita of Rav Mana, which means that he took more. So that more we never had before. And then afterwards, Melech Ashur, Sancheiriv exiled us. The Eibush that exiled us through Melech Ashur, just for the record. Huh? That's right. Very good. Thank you. I was saying that we have to learn more nach. Pashat nach. It's fun. It's sad that the little bit of nach that people like myself that go to yeshiva know is from the Gemara. At least we know a little bit, but yeah, we have to learn it. It's mamash achiyuv. The reasons behind it that I heard, I think the real reason, the way I see it, I can make the following argument that I don't think we learn Chumash Rashi properly in our system. Chumash Rashi Bechlal is, for me, Chumash Rashi is much harder than Gemara. And I'm not speaking just for me. Chumash Rashi, not only the Digduk Rashi that most people were never properly taught. It's very hard, Chumash Rashi. I don't know, it's not learned well. Even Chumash is not learned well. But I think it was not learned well because it's almost a given that you'll know it. I don't know how there's a given. I think it was a given that you'll know Nach. The old Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, they used to repeat the whole Nach every 3 months, almost by heart. That means that they were so fluent in it, could be, like look at the Yemenites here. They know the whole Tanakh by heart. Could be, it used to be that everyone knew it so well, and don't forget, Chinuch is on the parents, not on the school. The whole thing is crazy. Parent, we are Machayev to be. It was a given that they'll know. The yeshiva will teach you what you don't know. That's why you do Nach Yom. Now, the reasons that I heard was because when the enlightened, when the Maskilim came out, when the Reform movement came out, and similar, all of the missionaries today, they're so in Tanakh that the way we stay away from them is that we stay away from what they learn. But that reason never resonated with me. Counterintuitive. Thank you.
You don't know what they're talking about.
It's a chilul Hashem. I agree with you. If the goyim know it, even though they don't know it correctly, then we are the God gave it to us. Okay, weiter. Now coming back to our Mishnah. So Nachmal, case of the Mishnah was soil of Chutz La'aretz was put in a ship, and the ship entered the territorial waterways of the Holy Land. The Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah, if the ship is touching the ground. So I know you think about a big rowboat that's on the shore, and it's just in the ship. Then whatever grows from the soil, says Rabbi Yehuda, is bona fide produce of the Holy Land. Chayv and Meiser is subject to Shemitah. If the ship is like we think about a ship, even by the dock here, Marina del Rey, the ship is not, it's going to ruin the floor of the ship. The Chachamim hold it's also considered Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not considered Eretz Yisrael. We're going to see what's underneath that. Now, similar to the case of the Mishnah, the Braisa that we are beginning with, Afar Chutz La'aretz, same thing, it was put into a ship, but the ship entered Suriya's territorial waterway. So says the Braisa, it becomes like Surya. What does that mean, Aviv? Surya is chayiv in Maisris midrabanan. Midrabanan. Okay. So what? If the din that the soil in the ship, that's the way we'll learn, that becomes like the ground. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when does it become like the ground? When it touches the ground. Let me add a detail. If it's not touching the ground, midrabanan, it also is considered like the place that it's in. That's a rabbinic law, even though, huh? Like that. Only if the material, we'll see soon. We'll get back to that today. So 1 second. Normally we don't put two derabbanans together. The chiddush of the Braisa is that we are. So that's the way Rabbi Yosef Engel explains this Gemara. Number one, this Braisa, that's the way we'll learn, is going l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. The ship is not touching the ground. We're going to see in today's daf later that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, midrabbanan, it's as if it's midrabbanan. But you would think the whole chiyuv on Surya is only midrabbanan. Many times we don't make a double rabbinic law. It's not exeda, but it's one on top of the other. So the chiddush of the Braisa is that afar chutz la'aretz shabal Surya, and the ship is not touching the ground. And Rabbi Yehuda holds midrabanan, it's as if it's touching the ground. We even say that by Surya, which is a chiddush, because you would say, hold on, even if it's touching the ground, it's only chayiv midrabanan. Okay.
Now, if it's touching living plants that are directly touching the ground, like the live barnacles that are attached to ships constantly?
I don't think we need that again. We're going to see soon, if the understanding is about Yenika, then we're speaking about a ship that has a material kavan not metal, that halachically is as if it's a perforated flower pot. We are correlating the material of a ship with an atzot snakuf. And we're going to get that soon. Now, one second. Now I want to add something. If it's a double rabbinic, what happens if I want to be treidim ma'aser from this produce on some other produce? Remember the laws? You could do it only if they're same. It has to be produce of the same year. They have to have the same level of obligation. You cannot be treidim min achiv al abturim torah achiv. So knowing that this is a double rabbinic would also imply that if I have produce that grew on this ship, not touching the ground in the waterway of Surya, and I have other produce that is only one midrabanan, I cannot be treidim ma'aser mizelzeh. This is a double rabbinic, that's a single rabbinic. I'm saying that to understand the next line. On it, or if you have another ship that's over there the same way, Yatsa Misham Likan. Now, if the ship was in Syria a little bit and stuff grew there, now the Chacham drove the ship into the waterway of Eretz Yisrael. So the next step of the Braisa is that now Nischayiv, again, Rabbi Yehuda, since it's not touching the ground, only a single midrabanan, a higher level of obligation. Now this produce, again, not only is it chayv midrabanan, if you want to be treidim from this on something else, anything else that is only a single rabbinic could be either used to be treidim for it, or it could become rectified from it. But it is no longer good to be treidim ma'aser for that which grew before, when it wasn't the territorial waterways of Surya, because the chiyuv is not on the same level. That's the way Rabbi Yosef Engel understands this line. It's very deep. Not very deep, just halachically, you have to chop what we're saying. So that's something that I wish I brought a map. Maybe Kevin will find a map. Even the chayenus that we have were so good. In other words, in the Rambam, if I'm not mistaken, it's the beginning of Hilchas Truma. In the beginning of Zerayim, where the Rambam...
I'm sorry.
I know, I'm trying to remember, both in the Gemara, way back when, in the Yerushalmi, we had a few daf about it, like Mamish. And the Lashon of Chazal was Menachut Lefnim. So you have Akoy, I think this is from a bad memory. From Akoy is above Haifa until Ashkelon. Remember, Ashkelon, we learned, is already outside Eretz Yisrael. So if you make a line on the Mediterranean, you can make a line so ships that enter there, something like that. I'm more or less accurate, or I'm accurate. And if I'm wrong, so correct me, Chevron. Collectively, I think we remember. In the territorial waterways of the Holy Land. I want to correct myself. There's an opinion that says that you take that and you go further west. You go further west. So that's another important thing. I think it's a machlikas tanoim. Not so pashut. We have to go back. Okay. It says the Gemara. Now we're quoting the Mishnah. Chavra daf yutes on the bottom. 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. When the Rabbi Yehuda says, hold on, if there's soil in the ship and the ship is in the territorial waterways, when are you chayiv? When are you chayiv b'maisris? When are you chayiv in shvi'is? Chayiv midoy raisa? Oh, that's only bizman shasfina goy sheshesh. That's the word. When the boat is actually touching the ground. Now, what did we learn yesterday? This is important. We learned yesterday, this is very interesting, that Rabbi Yehuda follows those who hold that the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael is klal uprat, which means that even if we were to conquer, after the whole Eretz Yisrael was conquered, more territory, it will never be as holy as Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, soil michutz la'aretz that was brought into Eretz Yisrael, even though it's in the territorial waterways, cannot become mukdash b'kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So hold on. What happens if you bring in soil, Kevin said that, and you physically put it on the ground? Everyone will hold that if you plant something in that, even if it's very deep, it's considered that it's Yisrael. Why? According to Rabbi Yehuda, we're going with that logic, who says only that which was inside the boundaries could become holy after we conquered it, or after we have chazaka. You can't add to that. If you can't add to that, so why is it if you would put soil on the ground, that which grows from that soil will be considered product from Eretz Yisrael. That's the Gemara right now. It's because the soil that you put on the ground becomes bottle to the ground. It's to do with bittul. This is going to be very consequential. So now let's go back to our Mishnah. So therefore, that understanding would mean that when Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if the sfina is goysheshesh, you're chayiv. Why are you chayiv? Why? Because since the ship is on the ground, I know it's in the water, but laying the bottom of the ship is touching the soil underneath the water, then the soil in the ship is bottled to the ground underneath it. Bottle. And if there's water in between the ship and the ground, it's not bottled. Why would it not be bottled? That's the question. Like, why would water get in the way? So Amar Rab Chagai has a gavaldik suggestion. I'll tell you why. Rabbi Yehuda Kidate, Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion. Now, we're going, this is the Yerushalmi in one line, but in the Bavli would be a whole Amud. Let's quickly review the following. Aviv, you need coffee. Listen to me. You have Tchum Shabbos. We're good. That means that I am midrabanan only allowed to walk 2,000 amas outside the Makkah where I took on Shabbos, with all the details that we're living in LA. We don't know this. We don't practice it that much here because my Makkah Shavisa is the ganze LA. But if we were to take in Shabbos out there, maybe even in Big Bear, maybe even where people go out or over there in the Catskills, some areas, then you can only walk 2,000 amas, which is not a lot. If you want to go further, you have to put on Erev Tchumen. Okay. Now, what happens? Not me. My belongings. Obviously, either Shabbos where there's an Eruv or on Yontiv, because Tchum is Shabbos Yontiv equals. Let's go to Yontiv just to make it. Yontiv, you're allowed to carry. Can you carry my coffee? The answer is that if you want to carry my coffee with you, my coffee is bound to my Tchum. It means even if me and you have a different Tchum, you know why? Because your house is 100 meters to the north of mine, which means you can walk 100 meters more than I could in the north. But my coffee is bound to me. What happens if you have food that belongs or belonged when Shabbos or Yontif came in to two different people? Then that food can only be taken to a place that is within the tchum for both. It's bound to both. Case that we are referring to, this Rabbi Yehuda Kedate, is when you have a woman, just a mashal, or a man. Someone when Yontif came in, I owned flour. I want to have a shtickle challah. So tomorrow on Yontif Day, I go over to you, my neighbor, and I say, can you lend me water? A liter, and I'll give you back the water. But the water, when Yontif came in, belonged to you. There's a machloikes tanoim, whether the bread, the dough, that you can say is comprised of my flour and your water. If we are to view it that way, then that challah may only be taken on Yontif to a place that shares the common tchum between me and you. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree with that. You know what Rabbi Yehuda says? Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't care about the tchum of the owner of the water. I only care about the owner of the flour. Question is why? Because Rabbi Yehuda, that's the way we're understanding, sees the water is garnished. The water is nothing. Not hefker, it's nothing. Halachically, water is as if it's not a thing, it's not substantial. Now let's apply that over here. If we're going to make a stretch that Rabbi Yehuda, water is not a mitzias, then the ship that has earth in it, water, and then the earth of Eretz Yisrael, that water is as if it's not there. It's as if the ship is floating in the air. The void, the nothingness that's separating the Afer El Yoinim with the Afer Tachtoinim, we said not Mayim El Yoinim, Mayim Tachtoinim, that makes a hefsik which does not allow for bittul to happen. If water would be considered a thing, so then the water is water of Israel, water of Eretz Yisrael. So why would not the Sfina be bottled to that? The answer is, how beautiful is that, right? Rabbi Yehuda Kedate, Rabbi Yehuda Poiter B'mayim. Poiter B'mayim means that the person who has the dough doesn't have to take into account where is the tchum of the owner of the water. We disconsider it. And what's the logic behind it? Argues Rab Chagai lefi she'ein bahem mamish. Halachically, for tchum, water is considered a non-existence existence. Al pi ruchnis it fits, right? Because water is there's a greater expression of oneness in water than in the earth, right? Earth is made out of granules, like a many together, but each one stays separate. Separation. Where do you see achdus more in mayim? That's why mayim brings tara. How do we become one with God? How do we become one with God? Just for the record, one necessary step is for us to stop being. It's how can I include myself in the infinity of God if I'm finite? The only way has to be is that I become batel. Bitel ayesh, bitel b'metzias. So water is like batel. But here we are making this bitel into a thing. So it's as void. So since the water, Rabbi Yehuda, by Tchumim is not existent, so the water creates a void that doesn't allow for the earth and the ship to be connected to anything for you to say it's batel to it. That's the logic of Rab Chagai. The Rosh would say that you have to dance now. In such a gewaldige logic. So the Gemara says, that's Rab Chagai. Amar Rabavin, I completely reject what you're saying. You have to know how to read this. Loi mistabra de lo mechalfa shitase. The only way out of this blunter that we're going to explain will have to be that actually you have Rabbi Yehuda's opinion reversed. You have it the opposite of the way you understand it. Look inside the top Mara folder. That's the way he interprets these words. Loi mistabra de lo. Meaning, loy mistaber ze loimer. Doesn't make sense what you're saying, the asal shitase. Ela adaraba. It's so not like the shita that really we're going to have a problem from what he said, to the point that we're going to want to argue that you have Rabbi Yehuda's version reversed. Al karfach muchlefe shitase. And the word the law, according to this interpretation of the Marafolda, means do ela, not the loy. Loy mistabra, that do ela. Now, what's the issue? The issue is that be'emes, we said this on Amud Aleph, but now the Gemara is going to address it, that even though Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah that only if the sfina is goysheshes are we machayev the produce from this soil, but we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even when the sfina is floating in the water, the way ships are meant to float, there is going to be a chiyuv midrabanan. That's the meaning of the next lines. That that we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even when the sfina is not goysheshes, which means when the boat is the way you imagine a boat to be, the boat is floating on the water. This has to mean midrabanan, and that's what the Gemara means. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda is saying it's b'chlal nothing. No, midrabanan you're going to be chayiv. That means when this ship is not touching the ground, I want you to know, guys, that there are times that the word halacha means halacha l'Moshe Sinai or biblical. There are other times that's not unique here, that when the Gemara says mahalach, it means midrabanan. You have to just get used to the words of the Yerushalmi. Clear that Rabbi Yehuda will hold that even when the sfina is not goysheshes, you're chayiv midrabanan. Okay. So number one, we're saying two steps. No, it's what we're making clear. The Gemara wants to make clear that when the Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah that if it's goysheshes, you're chayiv, it must mean midoiraisa. Because when it's not goysheshes, you're not completely out of any obligation. And the Gemara is going to prove both of these points, that when it's goysheshes, you're chayiv midoiraisa. When it's not goysheshes, even though the Mishnah seems to say, Rabbi Yehuda says you are exempt, it means you are exempt midoiraisa, you're chayiv midrabanan, and therefore, Rab Chagai, you're wrong. Now, that'll explain in a moment. First, we'll get to the proofs. That how do I know? That if it's not goysheshes, you're chayiv midrabanan. You're talking not chayiv deraisa, but you are chayiv midrabanan because according to Rabbi Yehuda, you are allowed to be toidem mimena. He writes that in a brayso. that which grew in the soil michutz la'aretz, that's in the territorial waterway of Israel, that's not goysheshes. That product could be used to be toidim for another product that grew on dry land, but in a flower pot that was not perforated. And that we already know. If you have a flower pot, whenever the Mishnah, Braisa, otzitz, nakev, otzitz, we went through this way back when. It took us so many years to chap that. We saw it somewhere. Normally, we're speaking about flower pots that are laying on the ground. Just to make it clear. There is a chiddush that even if these flower pots were not on the ground, if they are on pegs, and we found in certain Rishonim up until 3 tfachim, which is a stretch, not hanging. 3 tfachim, within 3 tfachim, even if it's not touching the ground, it's as if it's touching the ground.
You have the flower pot hanging on the ground, it's as if you can't move the flower pot.
So that will be if it's within. If it's within a certain area, maybe we learned this in Shabbos. I just want to put it out there. So here, the din will be like this. If you have produce growing ma'atzitz, she'ein nakuf. Atzutz, that's not, Aviv, one more thing, just to know these details. The perforation has to be big enough for one root to be able to go through it and go into the ground, even if nothing is going out from it. What we are saying is that if the flower pot is perforated, halachically, that which is growing in the flower pot is also drawing nourishment from the ground. If it's drawing nourishment from the ground, then its chiyuv of maisris is midoiraisa. When the flower pot is einoi nakuf, it's not perforated. This is a given already. Then you're not chayiv midoiraisa. You are chayiv midrabana. Rabbi Yehuda holds that. How do I know that? Because you could be toidim from that which grew in the ship. That's einoi goy sheshes for produce that grows in a atzot she'eino nakuf. In the other way also, or umayatzot she'eino nakuf aleha, and that's befedish. Kahadadatani. Abraisa says that Rabbi Yehuda oimer atzot she'eino nakuf. Again, mahalacha. Mahalacha means midrabanan. Even though it's not taking nourishment from the ground. Yeah, biblically it's not taking nourishment from the ground, but rabbinically you're chayiv to be toidim u'ma'aseh. And since it's only chayiv midrabanan, so these are the normal rules. First of all, utrumase eino midamas. If truma falls into chulin, min b'minoi, even though midoy rice it's batal beroiv, min b'minoi, midrabanan, we know you need to have a ratio of 100 to 1. If you don't have the ratio of 100 to 1, all of it is called dimua, mixture, or demai. What is it? And a non-kohen cannot eat from any of it. However, that's only if the truma that fell into chulin that didn't have the ratio of 100 to 1 is truma doiraisa. This truma that grew on the atzit she'eino nakuv, that's only midrabanan, won't create dimua. It will be batal even on a rabbinic level. Beroiv chulin. Another din is if a non-kohen ate truma b'shoigeg, keren v'choimish, that's only on truma doiraisa. The ein chayav al choimish. Point over here all is that if it's about bittul, that's the logic that the Gemara is saying. If it's all about bittul, if it's not about yanika, what difference does it make whether there's a perforation or not a perforation? You, Rab Chaga, you're giving me this whole vart that since when it comes to the dinim of tchumen, Rabbi Yehuda discounts the owner of the water as if the water is not there, so there's a void. Because of the void, the offer is not batal. Well, otzit she'eino nakuv, that's laying on the ground, there's no void there. And it has nothing to do with bittul. We learned this so many times. It has to do whether it draws nourishment or it doesn't draw nourishment. So we're going to bring it back over here the same way. That's how it's all about yanika and not about bittul. Okay.
That means the Chachamim who argue on the view that they say it's biblical?
The Chachamim hold that you're chayiv biblically. Very good.
That's a kiddush, or is that already established?
That once we proved from this Braisa that even Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayiv midrabanan, it becomes clear that they argue in the Mishnah. So they're arguing whether you're chayiv midoiraisa or only midrabanan, which means the Chachamim who don't demand for the Sfina to be goysheshes holds your chayiv midoiraisa. It has nothing to do with bittul. But let's go back to what we learned yesterday. So why are you chayiv midoiraisa? Not because there is Yanika, according to the Chachamim, because the Chachamim hold that we are able to add Kedusha even to parts of the world that wasn't initially part of the Holy Land. One way is to conquer more land the right way. Another way is to physically bring soil into the territorial waterway of Eretz Yisrael. That in itself consecrated, nothing, that earth is in itself holy. Rabbi Yehuda holds you can't add. If you can't add, why would there be a chiyuv? Rab Chagai, batal, not batal. According to, that's the name I didn't remember. According to Rabavin, yoinik or not yoinik. And when it's touching the ground, it's yoinik. That's what we said. So in the Bavli, we have a machlekes. What is the sfina made out of? It's not so simple. And there's a whole machlekes. Whether wood, in other words, when a ship doesn't have a hull. So either it's a earthenware type of ship, or a wooden, and each one argues with the other. But it's a material that allows Yanika to happen through it. Now, why is it midarabanan you'll be chayiv? Like atzad she'eno nakuf, atu nakif. Sfina eno gesheshes, atu. But it's the reason behind will be about Yanika. And indeed, says the Gemara, let's go further to this din of atzad nakuf. Rab Hila b'shem Rabbi Lazar, hakoino atzad nakuf v'Surya. If you purchase a atzad nakif in Surya, even though the buyer did not buy the land underneath it, but make it clear, when I buy just like I buy a tree without the earth, I don't own the earth at Tohim, but the tree can stay in the earth. When I buy a flower pot that is perforated, even if the seller tells me I am not selling to you the earth underneath it, it's automatically the top layer of the earth upon which it's laying is considered mine. So therefore, I own enough in the earth that will be machayev me. Now, in the case of Surya, only midrabanan to begin with. Even though it's clear that I'm not buying the earth underneath it, nevertheless, implied in that sale, because when I buy a perforated pot, it's not that the understanding is not that I'm going to take it from there to put it in my house. I can leave it there. If I can leave it there, then the earth immediately underneath the pot, or the top layer of the earth, is included in the sale. That's the meaning of offer shal gabav kana, and therefore l'chayvoy b'maisres u'b'shvis. Chayvoy means midrabanan, and not only if it's laying on the ground, elafilu nasan al gabish seidois, even if it's on pegs. I know again there is a shir. To my memory, there's a shir. What's your name again? Avram from Seattle. That Avram is saying that he remembers from Milchas Shabbos. It could be that even if it's hanging, which might mean there is no shit. Here we're speaking about Yesedos, and when it comes to pegs, whatever. We need Yakir, we need Danny. A few guys are missing over here, but I'm not minimizing the people that are here. There, Af Rabbi Yehuda will be moide. Af Yehuda moide gevaldik. In other words, it drew a soil from the ground. Now, ma bein bein asfina. Why is it that if it's an atzut snakuf doesn't have to be on the ground? Now we have a big kasha. We already established that the ship that's on the ground, why is it chayiv doiraisa? Because it's yoinik. That means that even though the ship doesn't have a hole, if not, it's going to sink. It's as if it has a hole. So now we have a bomb question. Now that we just quoted Shitas Rabbi Yehuda by atzut nakuf, it doesn't have to physically being on the ground. But atzutz nakuf, I'm not going. Atzutz nakuf doesn't have to be on the ground. This ship that has soil in it on the ground is drawing nourishment from the ground midoiraisa. We just established Rabbi Yehuda. So why don't we say even if it's floating, why would it not draw nourishment from the ground underneath it? Answers the Gemara. Ma bein asfina. I love it. The difference is that the sfina is moving. Sfina oil v'yoredes. The movement doesn't allow the nourishment to go through it. The atzitz that's perforated, that's on pegs, is stationary. So whatever magic is happening that is invisible, it's not magic, it's going through the air. Yeah, if you're stationary, if you're stable, you're yoinik. If you're moving around in life, stop moving around. When you're davening, certain people, they don't stop shuckling. Certain people by Shemon Esrei, they're very still. Maybe it's about connection. You're trying to connect to something. So you might have the perforation. But if you're moving ahead, there are certain people that used to, they walk when they daven. I heard a good story from the Gerrer Rebbe regarding that. And someone told him that he's not feeling it when he's davening. And the Gerrer Rebbe told him in a very shrewd way, he knew Baruch HaKodesh. The guy used to walk, stop walking. Stay in one place. Okay, that's Rabbi Akiva. That's okay. L'chaim. Anyways, Mike, I know it's late, but I really want to, we'll stop over here. Okay, guys? No, we're late. Okay, we're gonna make up, maybe next year we're gonna learn another 5 minutes.